Hello, welcome to Chop Shop Motors. My name is Clay, and it's time to jump into a little progress on the 64 Falcon two-door hardtop. So we are kind of in flight on a few projects. The F100 is off at paint, and so there's body work happening. The small block Chevy for Brian Willingham's Model A is at the machine shop, having some love given to 63 327 block and crank and rotating mass. So that's going to be a really slick little engine when it's all done. It's a 63, so super early 327. Should be a 30 over, fingers crossed, 30 over 327. We're going to put some aftermarket rods in it. It's got some fuelie heads we're going to put on it, and that's a story for another day, but we're excited that that one's moving along. So we're chipping away at the projects in Chop Shop Motors. The F100 Buffy, which is Shelby's truck, should be probably coming back to the shop in the next, I don't know, month or so, maybe even less. So we're excited. It's hard to get too enthusiastic right now in the Phoenix area, Scottsdale area. It's 118 out during the day, so the enthusiasm to go out and work on stuff starts to wane a little bit. To do this video, I shut the evap off in the shop, and so we're on kind of a shortened list before I keel over and have to turn things back on so I can do some stuff. So what I thought I would do is show you a quick walk around on the 64 Falcon. We had done some videos on it a while back, but let's catch you up to speed on where it's at right now, kind of what the project is, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to work on today, which is putting together the 289 for it and starting to make some progress to get the motor checked off the list and complete. And while it's not going to take, it's not going to run point. Once the truck comes back, we'll jump back on it. But this is kind of the next project that I think we'd like to get running. And so let's do some work to get it running. Let's take a look at it. Here is the 64 Falcon two-door hardtop. I think these are such cool little cars. My first car was a 64 Falcon. It's the convertible that you see in the background sometimes. And I've had 4 or 5 or maybe even more of these little hardtops in my life. And a few years ago, I was kind of longing to get another one, and they've gotten harder and harder to find. So this was kind of what I came up with. I did some research through some people that sold Falcon parts, and this one was owned by a gentleman who has a bunch, probably 4 or 5 Falcons and about 10 or so Comets, and he has a slew of stuff in his backyard and other backyards and things of that nature. And so I talked to him, and he was getting ready. He had 10 cars at a friend's house that he had to get rid of, and so all of a sudden he was ready and open to selling 1 or 2. And this was, it was just kind of at the right place at the right time. And he was hard to negotiate with because he didn't really want to part with it, even though he didn't have space for it. But I was able to negotiate for this car. So what is this car? It's a 64 Falcon hardtop. The car originally came with a 6-cylinder, and it was from, I think it was Tennessee or Arkansas that the car spent most of its life. I'm kind of just wandering around. I'll show you the inside. When I saw the car, it was a bench seat, had a 302 or 289 and a 4-speed T10 in it, and he would not part with the motor and transmission. So basically I bought the car with, he pulled the motor and transmission out, and it was about as hot when we did this as it is right now. So you can't see it. I put a rear floorboard in it in a different video, so I still have some other floorboards to do, but that's kind of the gist. He sold it to me without a engine transmission, and I was on the prowl, so I was like, okay, I'll do it. I have a bunch of that stuff, or had quite a bit of that stuff, so it wasn't horrible, and so that's how I bought it. Since then, kind of the good and the bad of the project. The car's relatively solid as far as it hasn't been driven in the salt or the rust, so it wasn't rusted out in like the front sub area or things of that nature. But the water leaking in, this window was broken, the driver's side window. The mechanism, the rollers were broken, so the window was down, and so water got in. The rear window rubber was weathered to death, so water got in. So what that did, pop the trunk here. What that did was it rusted out this piece around the trunk opening. Okay, so I put a little light in here, seeing how we couldn't really see much, to make it just a little bit easier. So inside the trunk, the back area in front of the fuel tank was replaced. It was replaced with a factory Ford piece out of another Falcon, and that part was rusty and scaly, so we replaced that. These pieces on the side had a little bit of work done on them because they were a little rusty, and the really hard part, quite honestly, was replacing this rail that goes around the deck lid that the rubber goes in. So that was replaced, and I put a new rubber in it. The other piece was that the deck lid itself was rusty and rusted out, which I didn't even catch when I bought the car, and just, you know, my ignorance around buying stuff that's not from Arizona, rust that I'm looking for, rust that you just don't think. And plus, I was like in love with it. I was enamored by it, so I had my beer goggles on when I bought it, and that's just kind of how it happens. So replaced that front panel up there, replaced some work here on the shelves for the quarters, both sides, replaced this rail, replaced the deck lid with another, it was, the other one was straight, it was just rusted out. And so while I wasn't trying to build a car that was flawless, I really am not a big fan of keeping the rust in them. So for me, probably being from Arizona, it just didn't, I couldn't get past it. So had the deck lid on it, then went underneath, and I got in 2 quarters with the car, and they weren't quarters, they were the lower portion, probably the bottom 6 inches of the rear quarter, so right kind of along here and down. I got on both sides of those with the car, so replaced both of those on both sides, fixed the shelf inside the trunk shelf, which comes kind of inside the trunk and down to meet up with the quarter, fixed that on both sides, and really made the back of the car where it was, you know, I was happy with it. I mean, it's not restored, it's not a rotisserie, but it was sealed up, it looks good, it works good, it kind of fit the needs of the car. And then we spotted in the paint where the body work was done, fixed a couple issues from the body, and at that point the back of the car was done as far as I was concerned. Painted the inside of the trunk, made it all Wimbledon white. I replaced the rear, get my handy dandy treble light, replaced the rear panel that says Futura. I had located a nicer bumper for the rear that wasn't bowed, which most of them are, replaced that. Put in some taillights that came out of inventory. So as you can see, lots of the stuff I was doing was stuff that was, I already kind of had in inventory, just because I love these cars. I'd pieced some together, and my plan was always to put a Falcon together, another Falcon. So let's look at some of the other pieces. So next steps after the back of the car was done was I pulled the rear window out, cleaned the scale and grunge out of the package tray, repainted it Wimbledon white, replaced the rear window rubber, and put the glass back in just to tidy up the back. So that was really the extent of what I've done after the back of the car. Inside the car had a 3-speed manual column in it that had the shift arm cut off or pulled out or whatever. So I bought a 4-speed floor shift column for it and put that in it and made it so it would, when it's all done, it will look the part of a factory Falcon 4-speed car. I also had the floor tunnel, even though it's a little crusty, it will weld up and work perfect to have the factory pop out for it's going to have a top loader, so for the top loader. Move back a little bit, you can see there's a console peeking out. I rounded up, that's the color the interior is going to be. I rounded up a console. Actually, I bought it in Canada when I was up there, and that was pretty cool because I found it, brought it down. It's going to work perfect for this project. Has just kind of the right amount of wear and yet still looks presentable. Interior wise, seat covers, I bought a complete interior kit for it, so that's going to be all replaced. I haven't bought the door panels for it, but I will. They're available. The inside was painted like an aqua. That's going to get painted to the dark metallic blue that matches the console, and it should be really slick. Okay, so along the way I fixed door latches and door locks and window cranks and all kinds of stuff like that. Got my handy dandy extension cord, trouble light, video, spotlight, running around 32. Let me pop the hood. So when we look inside, the engine compartment is, I mean, it's not horrible. It's had an amateur rattle can freshen up at some point in its life. I will give it a really good cleaning and we will paint it again. Inside edges of the fenders down here will get painted Wimbledon white. I'm not going to paint the fenders. I'm going to leave them kind of distressed, just because I don't, at this point I don't need to spend the, $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 on a paint job on it. Isn't going to make the car any more fun, and I think it's going to look super cool. So I'm going to leave the paint. I will paint under the hood, paint it back Wimbledon white, paint all of this jam inside here white, satin black engine compartment, so it looks fresh. I replaced some of the pieces that were jacked up and missing, like the gas pedal, things of that nature. I've replaced. Got a 4-core radiator for it. Radiator went with the engine. Lots of stuff went with the engine, so that's just kind of the nature of the haggling. Other than that, I will pull the front fenders up off of the car. I want to touch up the lower valence. I have a better front bumper for it, and I have to weld in a couple of the blind nuts for the hood, because the hood hinge it won't adjust because the blind nut's spinning. So a few touch-ups there, jam it, and then I can drop the motor in it. I say that like it's super fast. I still have to put floorboards in it. So floorboards, then I can drop them on. On the outside, it came with a set of rollers. I bought a crusty, nasty set of these Krager GTs, which are an aluminum all the way to the edge, so it doesn't have an aluminum center that's welded into a steel outer that is chromed like SS is. It has a steel band, and then it has a complete aluminum center that goes all the way to the edge. So it has a little bit cooler look to it, or the SSs are cool. It has the look I wanted for this car. So I found a crusty set of those, cleaned them up to kind of a first level 2 tidy, and I can always take them off and have them polish the outer lip down the road. But at this point, that's kind of as far as I need to go. I got some center caps for it that are the right ones, GT, and I put some new tires on it. So that's kind of a super brief overview of Project Falcon. And now let's take a look at the motor. That's probably the fun part. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is the thermometer that's in the shop. And inside this shop it's already 100. So just a little peek at the temperature here. One other thing that I wanted to just add a little detail about on this car is I did share that it was a 6-cylinder car originally. It has probably been a V8 car way longer than it ever was a 6-cylinder. So when I bought it, it had been hot rodded many years ago, and it had the Mustang or Falcon front spindles put on it. It had the V8 rear end. It had all of the engine and transmission out of a V8 Falcon in it. So it had long since been a V8 car, even though it started out as a 6-cylinder. Pretty minor differences between the 6 cylinders and the V8. Lots of 6 cylinders were converted. So not trying to make any, not trying to make any kind of assumptions that it's actually a V8 car. It never was. It was a 6-cylinder car, but it's a V8 now, and it's super cool. All right, just wanted to catch that detail for you. Now comes the fun part. I've had this block and all the parts for a while now, and I haven't had a chance to put it together because of projects that I've put in front of it. So now it's time to put it together. What you're looking at is an early 289. It is a C5. I'll spin around, see if I can get that part number for you. I don't know if there's any part number guys out there that are kind of excited about that stuff. It's a C5 AE block. So 6 bolt 289, and it was a really nice block. So I had a block. The motor I was going to build for it was already 40 over. I didn't want to go 60 on one of these motors. They're thin wall castings. They don't tend to be too happy at 60 over, my experience. It probably would have been all right in something with a little more frontal space, but the Falcons and Mustangs don't have much radiator, so that compounds the issue. So 30 over is what I wanted. I located this block. It was a little pricey because these are getting a little hard to find, and I've since found another one as a spare just to have. So I tend to get when I find that I can't find them, I start looking for them and get a spare kind of in the rafter somewhere. So the block went in. It was checked for cracks. It was thoroughly cleaned. It was bored. It had new main bearings. New main bolts. We put ARP bolts in it, and did the same with the rods. It got new pistons, and we put new ARP studs and rod nuts in it just to keep it from having a, it's 64, 65. I mean, it's 55 years old. If it'd been running, that's a lot of potential fatigue. I ordered. There's the valve covers for it. Here's all the gaskets and bearings and everything in there. It's got a new camshaft that's going in it. It's got a set of 289 heads that I finished up. They're down there all wrapped up, ready to go on. Heads have had all new, kind of new everything. I put screw-in studs, seats, new valves, and check for cracks. Kind of everything to make sure they're good. The hard part is you used to be able to do a set of heads really cheap and not have to spend much money on them. It's when you deal with the old stuff, you just have to be more careful, and a lot of times you have to spend a little more money on it. So I've had some pulling the stud out issues. That set of heads already had a stud pulled out, so it was much like the set of heads on the red 64 pickup in that it was going to be problematic in that space. So out came the press-in studs, and we put some screw-in studs in. So that's kind of the overview. I have a 64 style timing chain cover, and I'll run a 64 style timing chain. They're a little different. So when you look inside at the motor, it will look as if it's a 64 motor, and that's kind of the vibe I'm going for. I have a iron 4-barrel intake manifold for it, and a really cool aluminum oval air cleaner. Kind of looks like the 427 style air cleaners, which is the same style I have on the convertible, and I like that, so I have one of those. I actually found that at a junkyard for $15. Of course, the base cost me about $100 to buy the base for it, because the base wasn't right, but all in all, pretty cool deal. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I think I should probably start cleaning and bring you back after I've made a little progress. Here's a little progress on the 289. Block was cleaned up and gallery plugs installed in the front and the rear, and the freeze plugs. Crankshaft was installed. It's got ARP bolts for the mains. Again, it's a motor's been around a long time, so we want to make sure it stays together. Other things that we're getting ready to do, I'm cleaning the pistons, getting all the rings on. So that's occurring right now. We'll get all the pistons unbagged and get the rings on and get those ready to slide in. I had a new Comp Cam's 268H camshaft for it, and apparently I've had it for a long time. I've had it for a long time, and I was looking at it, and it actually had some water damage on it. I'm gonna get a picture of it here for you, and you can probably see it right there. You see some water damage on that journal, and I took some emery cloth to it, but it had some pits in the journal, and it has them. It's obviously got into the box. You see a little moisture, which is too bad because it's a brand new cam, but I don't feel comfortable using it. Would it be okay? Maybe. But I put a lot of time and a fair bit of money into the motor to shortcut it here. So I'm going to order Comp Cam's 2424. It's a little lopier than this cam. I'll get that coming for it. And that means that I will get some different, I'll order the springs that go with the camshaft, so I'll pull the springs off of those heads I did, and change the springs just to make sure everything's compatible. So that's kind of how we progressed. So little motor's starting to look like a motor rather than just a bag of parts. I'll start putting the pistons in, and I'll bring you back when I get them in. Alright, we'll check the progress. Short blocks together for the most part. Pistons are in. Rods are all torqued. reciprocating mass is pretty much all done. We don't have a camshaft yet, so I'm going to go in now and order the camshaft. I wish I would have. I mean, these parts have been sitting here for a year. I wish I would have paid a little more attention. I would have had the camshaft here already, but that's probably just the way it goes. So I'll go in, I'll get a camshaft ordered, should be here within the next week or so, and we'll button up the rest of the build. But this was a nice bit of progress for the little 289, and it gets it one step closer. I'm Clay for Chop Shop Motors, and we'll see you on the next project.